Hi, welcome to One by One yet again. This week we're looking at the issue of spiritual conversations, leading people in our everyday conversations so that we can talk about spiritual issues. Have a look at page 10 on your CMTC workbook. You'll have all the information there, but first and foremost we need to realise that the word spiritual conversation is really a misnomer. It's a bad word to use because everything we do is spiritual. Everything we say is spiritual because we're spirit-filled beings. But in terms of the lesson, spiritual conversations are conversations about the gospel, about people's beliefs, about their values, or their reasons for rejecting Christ. So it's any conversation that moves beyond the shallow and superficial, how you going, how's work, how's life, that kind of thing. So we can see all of our conversations as a step-by-step progression towards sharing the gospel with people. This is what we're talking about in terms of spiritual conversations. Now, in general, don't be worried, don't be ashamed, don't be scared to bring up spiritual things with people. Most people love to share their views and their opinions. Most people love to share their thoughts. And most people don't mind being asked what they think about, be it the church, the Bible, the world, other religions or what have you. They're happy to share their opinion. And as we listen to people, as we engage with them, it helps us to understand where they're coming from. As we understand more of that person's worldview, their understanding of the world, we can come to them with the gospel in a more relevant way. So in a spiritual conversation, we're trying to make a guesstimation of where that person's at and which particular gospel method will work best or impact them best for the sake of their salvation and for the sake of the kingdom. So how do we engage in spiritual conversations? How do we move forward from that superficial, how you going, how's life, how's work type conversation? First and foremost, we need to pay attention. We need to realise that the conversation isn't about us, but we need to make it deliberately about the other person. So pay attention to what the particular person is saying and look for key words that you can use to bring the gospel into the conversation. Try and pique their curiosity. Colossians 4, 5 and 6 says we are to make the most of every opportunity. And so you can try and arouse a little bit of curiosity so they start asking you questions. As you're doing this, it's a good opportunity to be praying that the other person will ask you questions and praying that they'll understand the gospel as you share it with them. So while you're talking, think of key words and use those key words to link into the gospel. So as an example, I'm in a fish and chip shop. The guy serving me, he was in a country town and he says, "Oh, why are you in town?" He obviously knew I was a visitor. And I said, "I'm here in the church to do some teaching for a local Presbyterian congregation." And the guy said, "Oh, I'm not very religious." Now there's a key word, religious. And so I said, "Oh, neither am I." And I turned around and I'm praying, "Lord, let him take the bait," is really what I prayed. And he said, "What do you mean?" And so there is an open door. And I was able to share the gospel with this particular fellow, standing there waiting for the fish and chips to actually cook and to be ready. And so I was able to basically work through the C2C, creation to completion, with him in that short amount of time. Now you need to be asking pertinent questions that relate to that particular person, questions that help bring out his worldview or her worldview, questions that bring out their beliefs and their understanding so that you can move forward in the conversation. So here are some pointers to help you get going. Firstly, be a good friend. In other words, pay attention to the other person. Don't just focus on yourself and your needs and your day and your points. And a good friend is other person centered. Ask relevant questions. Questions that dig a little bit deeper into that person's life, into their worldview, into their beliefs. Be yourself. Don't try and be like somebody else. Just be you and let you be in that moment. Try and have sympathy or empathy towards where that person is at, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, why they have their particular worldview. Share some empathy with them. Also remember that the quality of your life speaks volumes. People need to not just hear the gospel in your life, but they need to see it in action. They need to see the character of Jesus in you. So they need to see things like honesty, trustworthiness, keeping your word, all those kinds of things. You'll never share the gospel successfully if your life contradicts the gospel itself. So watch out for the quality of your life and make sure it matches the gospel you're trying to share. Also, raise issues as they're relevant. And that's part of having a conversation. So when a particular issue comes up, that might be the open door to raising those issues. So in your workbook, you'll notice there are several scenarios that are presented to you. Have a look at page 12. Now, in your small group, or if you've got a large cell in smaller groups, take time just to think through and discuss how you could respond to each particular conversation to turn it into a spiritual conversation. So all you're doing is really kind of role-playing each particular scenario, looking at how to move it forward in terms of spiritual conversations. When you've done that, come back to the reflection time. So in our reflection time, again, take time to share and think about some of the spiritual conversations you've had in the past. Share what happened, how it went, and what the outcome was. Think about why we should seek to have spiritual conversations with people. It might be people over the fence, it might be at a supermarket with someone who's serving, or even with a close friend over coffee. Why should we seek to have spiritual conversations? And also try and think about what are some of the factors that have stopped you from having spiritual conversations in the past. And finally, how can we overcome these factors? How can we overcome those things that stopped us in the past from having spiritual conversations? So take some time now to reflect through that, and again, finish your time as a cell group in prayer. We'll see you next time.